Well, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. I'm Deepthi Diwan, your host for today, and I welcome you all to the third edition of the Economic Times BFSI Innovation Tribe Virtual Summit and Awards APAC edition. The virtual FinTech Summit that brings together all the key FinTech ready nations to get together and lay down the foundation and rules for the new age of digital financial services for 2020 and beyond, where we discuss and deliberate the future amidst the current challenges and pressing issues of all time, where we bring to you 50 plus speakers, 20 plus leading solutions and service providers, and 10 plus leading associations from across the region, where you get to partake in valuable and interesting discussions and where you get answers to your questions. We're very happy that this grand summit has been co-powered by Swift and NetApp. Our networking innovation partner is Juniper Networks and Inspira Enterprise. Asia Data Center partner is Yota. Cybersecurity partner is SonicWall. Associate partners Adobe, BCT Digital, Cashflow, Experian, and Zeta. Our exhibition partner is Clayfin. Knowledge partner is PwC. Thank you to our research partner IBS Intelligence and our global strategic partner 100 Open Startups. We'd also like to thank our associations with the Finance Industry Development Council, with the FC R&D Foundation, with International Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology, with CPAI, Sadhan, AIWMI, Indian Association of Alternative Investment Funds, the Risk and Compliance Professionals Association, Invest India, Maharashtra State Innovation Society, the NCOA, Kito, and Finnovatia. So, ladies and gentlemen, centered on the theme Bridging Asia's FinTech, Ideate, Innovate, and Disrupt, the summit brought to you by the Economic Times will be the culmination of thought leaders' views to bring about new strategies, quicken outlooks, and drive the business into the next phase of advancements through innovations. I know that you're all looking forward to the wonderful exchange of thoughts and ideas and are all geared up for an eventful day with an eclectic mix of global keynote presentations, panel discussions, fireside chats, case studies, and felicitations. This summit will predominantly answer how innovations across financial institutions will be the primary tool to achieve sustainable growth in Asia's fastest growing economies. Ladies and gentlemen, post the lockdown, when companies try to grapple back to where they left off, people are going to substitute most cash transactions with digital payments and transfers, fearing transmission of the virus through physical currency. To add to this, banking institutions are embracing newer age technologies, and many startups are already forming coalitions with NBFCs and banks for new age digital payment. It's definitely time to shake things up and explore and understand newer opportunities, newer techniques, and ideas to adapt to the changing scenario post COVID. And ET Impact is definitely our platform to do exactly that. So now it's time for our opening panel, and our discussion is titled Cross Country Corridors. In this discussion, we will aim at bringing together key stakeholders from leading fintech associations from across the region on a platform for dialogue and cooperation that is particularly important at this time of economic crisis and for growth in the coming years. Decision makers will discuss on how they can promote fintech in the region for supporting the financial services ecosystem. So, ladies and gentlemen, also please do share your questions with us, and our panelists would be happy to answer them for you. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful exchange of ideas. So, without further ado, I'm so delighted to introduce our esteemed panelists. Please welcome Ms. Camilla Bullock, Director General, Emerging Payments Association Asia. Welcome, ma'am. I welcome Mr. Nameer Khan, Chairman, MENA FinTech Association. Thank you for joining us, sir. Also joining us is Dr. Sanjay Tyagi, CEO of FinBlue and Director STPI. Thank you, Mr. Sopnendu Mohanty, Chief FinTech Officer, Monetary Authority of Singapore. And lastly, I'd like to thank Mr. Takeshi Kito, Vice Chairman of the Board, FinTech Association of Japan, for joining us. And this session will be moderated by Mr. Musheer Ahmed, co-founder, Hong Kong FinTech Association. Welcome, Mr. Ahmed. Thank you for joining us, and over to you, sir.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the opening panel. I'm delighted to have such esteemed speakers here with us. We're covering the length and breadth of Asia Pacific from the MENA Association on the west all the way to Australia and Japan on the east and north. And of course, we have a lot of speakers here who have built ecosystems for FinTech in Asia and also have been instrumental in changing policy or building policy here. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to kick right in with a question with regards to looking at cross-border opportunities and partnerships. From each of you, I would like to know what is the current state of cross-border partnerships in your local jurisdiction? How has it been evolving, and what's the progress per se? Maybe we can start with Camilla, and then we can move from east to west from there. Camilla?
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today. And I will speak a little bit both from Australia side, but also as I run the Emerging Payments Association Asia. So it's a little bit both APAC region and as well Australia. But I've done FinTech in Australia for a long time, and I think it has developed in a very positive manner in the way we see much more partnerships going on, both between banks and FinTechs, but also if we see merchants and big tech. And I think lately a lot of them in cross-border. I'm focusing on payments in its nature is more cross-border there. But I'm very pleased with what we're seeing going on, and also specifically the conversation of the more conservative banks and FinTechs.
Thank you. Takeshi-san?
Hi, thank you for introduction. I'm glad to be here today. And I'm from FinTech Association of Japan. And we established this association 5 years ago. And now we have more than 400 members, which consists of FinTech startups and financial institutions and other kind of large corporates as well. And in terms of international collaboration or partnerships, we have 25 international partners. Basically, they are FinTech associations or non-profit organizations from other countries such as Singapore, Hong Kong, and UAE, and India as well. And yes, it's current situation from Japan.
Thank you. Moving on to Mr. Mohanty. Singapore has been playing a very big role, especially for the region, in particular for ASEAN. Would love to know the progress when it comes to cross-border partnerships for FinTech.
Sure. Look, the very nature of Singapore as a hub, it relies on a lot of partnership. And we have been on the partnership journey for last 5 years. Not only as my friend from Japan spoke about, the number of partnership we have within the regulatory ambit with different central banks around the world, 30 plus if my latest number is correct. And the association itself has gone and done more than 50 partnership globally. But really there's something beyond partnership, which I think makes the big difference for many things we do out of Singapore, is ability to execute projects which involve multi-jurisdiction and both at the private sector as well as the government sector. I think the key positive trend in the ASEAN market is the ability to bring all the participants together, have a project in mind, have a timeline in mind, and execute to the plan. I think that makes it quite different from many jurisdictions of that ability of execution. That's one part. The second part is around the whole notion of the diversity of talent, because ultimately the hubs and the centers do rely on global talent. And if you have followed the last couple of weeks news, UK has announced a global talent tech visa. Australia has announced a tech visa, which looks like every country is now desperate for global tech talent, and they're going all the way out to offer attractive value proposition to get the best tech talent to the respective centers. So that's a very good sign. Third is having real project, because not having a real project doesn't make a lot of this partnership useful. So having a real project, solving a real problem. As an example, I would give, for example, Project Ubin, which is a very cutting edge blockchain based program where we're looking at cross-border payment as a way to re-architect that particular space, have pulling together more than 30 private sector, 20 odd different central public partners, and execute over 3 years with 5 phases and get the results, get the source code out, put it out there, and create that momentum. I think that's broadly says that why it's important to execute project as part of the progress of cross-border partnership.
Thank you. Dr. Tyagi from an India perspective and as well as STPI.
The cross-border partnership, India is historically, if you start since 1991, we are depending upon the cross-border, partnership, and we had a wonderful experience dealing with all the countries. And the growth of the ITES and the ESDM industry in India has happened because we have, embraced the entire world, and the US has become a, major partner as far as the IT service is concerned. And that was the first flywheel which we have taken up, and which has brought to the India to $1 trillion economy. And this whole partnership has resulted into some 207 billion, US dollar revenue, out of which 147 US dollar is an export, and a lot of employment have been created. And we feel that the next flywheel for India to move ahead is the startup ecosystem, which we are nurturing for last 2-3 years. And we feel that the FinTech is a very important domain of this startup ecosystem. And that is why the government of India have set up this Center of Excellence in FinTech at Chennai. Chennai being the financial services hub of this country and a SaaS capital as well. So we thought that this is the wonderful place where we can have such a Center of Excellence. And as far as the partnership is concerned, we are already having a UK-India Innovation Fund with us, and Contact have signed a very close MOU with the Center of Excellence in FinTech. BNY Mellon is our partner. He is also, investing into this whole initiative. Other national and international banks have become our partner. We are very far. I mean, looking towards the tie-up with the Singapore FinTech ecosystem, and we will be approaching very soon to them for signing certain MOU. So that is the status of the ecosystem right now. And we feel and we understand the cross-border participation into any project in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the talent, in terms of the aspirational, ecosystem requirement, which we think we have in India.
Thank you. Namir?
Thank you. Sure. So in terms of where the MENA region stands itself, so the critical and the most important thing to understand is MENA picked up late, right? So a market such as Singapore, the Western markets as well, they had matured far more faster versus where MENA's kicked off. Now, the very nature of the MENA region itself, when you're looking into the hubs over here, so we're looking into UAE, which is more, once again, heavily reliant, which is very much like, which is very much like Singapore itself, right? So what typically happens, it's heavily reliant on partnerships itself. So once again, the more the partnerships, the merrier it is. But a very critical point that Sopnendu just highlighted was execution, right? So partnerships and projects can be created left, right, center. They can be built, overnight. But the most important thing is the validity, the relevance, and the most important aspect is how implementable it is and how relevant it is to your region. So in terms of the partnerships, yes, on a regulatory level, the partnerships have been happening. There's a lot of cross regulatory work that's happening in terms of understanding the regulations piece itself. The other piece is that the important thing, because MENA, once again, like I said, is a region that is picking up. Once again, heavily reliant on international tech coming into the region as well, and most importantly, talent coming into the region. So as Sopnendu just mentioned, in terms of the talent coming in, the tech visas being issued, similar is the case over here as well. And most importantly, one of the reasons why the region is more ripe for such partnerships and more ripe for to be able to execute is on the opportunity itself. So the opportunity again is like the vital opportunity we always talk about is 380 million people, financial inclusion standing at 15%, insurance standing at a mere 3%. So once again, the opportunity side, and the other side is the maturity of the fintech ecosystem, which is growing. But at the same time, the important piece over here, which everyone understands, is partnerships. So partnerships come in two ways: the regulatory level, at the same time by ensuring you have talent coming in, and most importantly, you have tech coming in as well. So the reliance on partnerships is critical and key over here. A lot of things have been happening. Today's FinTech Abu Dhabi's launch as well. So that is also happening. We've been busy in that. And once again, a lot of announcements are going to be made in terms of the partnerships, but this time's focus is more towards executable partnerships.
Thanks for that overview. Like from here, from Hong Kong's perspective, we've seen things pretty similar to what's happening in Dubai as well as in Singapore, right? Where being hubs and financial centers, a lot of partnerships have been built over the long time. Our first MOU was with Singapore FinTech Association, and then following up with the rest of the others. But I think the key element is how we move from an MOU stage to execution, and which Sopnendu quite correctly pointed out. So now coming back to you on this, right? When we were speaking about the conversation around the 3 points that you mentioned, works for, in general, a startup ecosystem. But for fintech ecosystems in particular, what have been the key, what's the importance of these cross-border partnerships for you? Like, I mean, talent is of course one, but for the ecosystems to grow, how has this been benefiting or enabling the fintechs that are based out of Singapore or coming into Singapore?
So it's a good question. In fact, Mr. Tyagi was talking about the India's remarkable growth on the tech sector, but there is a distinct difference between fintech and the tech. And I want to just elaborate that why the same model will be very challenged to apply in fintech. So fintech, by the genesis of it, the founders of fintech are essentially people who have suffered a bad financial service, or they feel strongly about something and they want to fix it. And they're normally focused on one piece of the problem and they're trying to solve it. They're very small. Their area of focus is very product driven, and they start with a very idealistic way to solve that problem. By design, financial sector is highly regulated. It's not that something you can walk to a bank and tell them, here is a solution, use it tomorrow. It's a very complex process, starting from the very fact, adopting this technology, the new business model, and the regulatory supervision which goes on it. So that these structural challenges fintech have as against a normal tech, where you can just take a work, automate it, put people behind, code it, you're done. So there's that one big distinction between fintechs and the other techs and the startup in general with the other sector being highly regulated. So why it becomes quite unique, because from an approach perspective. So for example, if a startup with a bright idea, let's say to solve a cross-border payment issue. Now, for them to be successful, they need to have an operating regime in different markets. So they need a regulatory support, licensing support. That's one. Second thing, they need customer who will use them, and which means every country you go, there are different nuances. So there's a need to partner with local partner and start building that portfolio of customer you want to build. And third is access to capital itself, because unlike other sector, capital access is still a big challenge for fintech. While we do see a massive growth in capital recently on the investment side, but compared to other sector, it is not attracted that much of capital as you go to e-commerce, as an example. So the capital challenges do have in this space, and there's the early stage funding challenges in this space. So you got to find a way to fund yourself. So how do you build what I use a word called risk capital to fund these startups who are highly constrained by where they operate? So that's the broad differentiation. Now, when you talk about cross-border, it means that your product has to have some amount of interoperability. And interoperability becomes a key thinking in the many of this early stage product company, which is not easy. In fact, that's the reason why you see statistically, even the most successful unicorn are actually successful within their own domestic boundaries where they started. Yeah. You take any example, even the most successful one, hardly any great success story outside their country where their origin. Now they're coming up because now they're building partners. So these are the challenges we are trying in our own journey, trying to build that collaboration between banks, between fintechs, between the broader digital economic sector, and also some ancillary sectors like transport, logistics, travel, lifestyle. And can we bring it all together to make it work? And just to square up this thing, there are also policy impediment which doesn't allow it to happen that smoothly. Good example will be data regulations, as an example. So there's need to also work with the government to sort out that part as we move along in terms of cross-border partnership.
Thanks. I'll come back to the policy point a little later in the conversation as well. Dr. Tyagi, coming to you, India is as we are with so many states, you're in Chennai, you have Mumbai, you have Bangalore, you have Delhi, you have a bunch of other startup ecosystems which are trying to build for fintech. And when we're looking at cross-border, we're looking both eastward and westward. When you look into Europe or US, and eastward Southeast Asia, and the rest of East Asia. So how can in India, what would you say are the crux for fintech partnerships? How can we maybe standardize the process, or what would be the way forward for the ecosystem to collaborate better on a cross-border basis?
So I totally agree with Mr. Mohanty when he said that the tech industry and the fintech industry is entirely different, and we have to take a different approach to the fintech domain, and we very well understand, because it is a very highly regulated industry, and it is not easy for a startup to just approach a bank and go for their product and sell them. So these things have been taken care of, and that's why we came into this was the prime reason why the government of India himself came forward and set up a center of excellence in fintech. And to take care of all these regulatory compliance, we are trying to facilitate all these fintech startups through a sandbox which we are creating over here, where all the banks and the NPCIs and the RBIs and everybody's APIs are being hosted. And we have taken all our nationalized banks, also they are the partner of this fintech ecosystem. So we are trying to bring the buyers transformer people first to the whole ecosystem, so that the startup thrives among them. And we also feel that India is a place where we can not only we can provide the trained manpower, but we can also provide the scale to the people. Any product developed anywhere in the world, if they wanted to test it in a real environment on a scale, probably India is one of the best place for that. And the fintech adoption rate, which has gone up to 87% in March in this financial year, which is phenomenal. And the type of the financial inclusion which the government of India is striving for, probably that makes it a complete ecosystem for the fintech startup. And we feel that the another thing which Mr. Mohanty have mentioned about the funding, that is true. I mean, it is the funding to these startups are not that much liberally available as to other sectors, but we are trying to create our own fund. And we have seen that there is a lot of interest in the fintech sector, and probably by providing and solving all these regulatory issues and making this environment more smoother for the fintech startup, I think we will be able to nurture this industry in India.
Thank you. Camilla, just coming to you, right? You're a cross-country payments association, and recently we were having this conversation around FSB and other initiatives which are impacting the payment ecosystem. From your experience and with what the EPA has been doing, what would you say are the key initiatives that are needed for the ecosystem right now, maybe specific to the payment industry when it comes to cross-border?
So there are many. Actually, collaboration is on the top of the list of all of it. But it's interesting. I'm coming out from another panel discussion today, and digital identity, I think, is something that is underpinning everything that we want to do within this space. And that's something that if the conversation can be shared, we're going to go quicker in it. So that's probably one into the policy question later on also, but it is such an important conversation to have digital identity, and underlying that is the data, because we talk about moving money, but what we actually do is moving the data. So to have regulations around data, and that's something that FinTech Bridges has been working towards. But those are the two most important things that I see to move the dial in the cross-border payments conversation and in the payments industry. And the third one I would call out, maybe when we talk about why it's so important, is trust in partnership. Because nobody's going to send their money with a facilitator they never heard about. So through partnership, when you go into another country or within the ecosystem, you can really find that trust. I think that to get from the consumer, or if we're talking business to business. But above everything, digital identity is the conversation to be had, especially going back to the Bank of International Settlement project around enhancing cross-border payments, which we're working with them on. We had a 90-minute round table, and I would say about 30 minutes of that was digital identity, and it's just crucial to get it right.
And what would you say are the key elements from a partnership perspective that are needed for digital identities use across border? I mean, we're looking at Asia, where in certain parts of Asia, about 80% of the population are unbanked in certain countries, right? So digital identity does play a key role in financial services, but what are the, you say, if you had to pick three main things that need to be done to improve digital identity access or get digital identity in Asia, what would they be?
Yeah, so I think to get the really shared best practice, because all countries are so different. I mean, that's the challenge we have. It's a very fragmented region, both out of interoperability, if we're just talking tech, but it's also culture. And you see, I mean, India has a beautiful digital identity system with Aadhaar, but they have a different culture from Australia has. Australia is quite far with our digital conversation, but we haven't been able to link it between the private sector and the public sector. So I can't nail it and say this is the thing that needs to happen. It was actually one of the questions that we had on the previous session, and we didn't really agree. But I think it is to share best practices, and even going into what Europe have done about GDPR, because that is a part of the trust in digital identity, that we can form the standards and share them, that people can trust the schemes. It's not going to be just one scheme, and it's not just going to be one issue of digital identity, but can you trust the digital identity you're providing, and can the bank trust that digital identity you're coming to them with?
Thank you. Takeshi-san, from a Japan perspective, Tokyo has been recently making a push to invite and attract more fintech companies to come over to Japan and set base there or build themselves there. What are the key initiatives you're seeing from a local ecosystem perspective, and what are if you want to highlight a couple of initiatives cross-border wise that you've seen work between Japan and the rest of Asia or otherwise?
Actually, I totally agree with what Mr. Mohanty said. Interoperability is quite important for Japan, of course, because in Japan, most of the companies or industries often tend to develop their own standalone systems and business models and market practices as well. So that's quite, it's really a problem in Japan. So we need to be connected with other countries and with other ecosystems. So our association's objective for international partnership is also developing interoperability with other countries. And recently, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government and other government-related organizations want to bring financial institutions and industries to Japan, because they want to be an international financial hub. So that's why many governments or organizations want to bring other countries of their talents, technologies, and companies as well. So yeah, this is what's going on here in Japan.
Thank you. Namir, in the Middle East, we've had a lot of legacy banks. So over time, you are seeing disruption slowly coming through. But how are you seeing collaboration between the ecosystems, especially fintechs, to challenge the incumbents, as it were, or to build newer models, considering also the level of financial inclusion is not as high as it is in some of the developed world?
So a very important question in terms of how the banks operate over here. So that's one of the, so in that scenario, regulation is one of the things that comes into play then. In our region, regulations would not really permit a challenger bank to come in and just set up instantly right away, because they have to go through certain regulatory layers, and unlike what you have in other regimes and in other countries, right? So one of the things is that. However, we are currently having many challenger banks and many digital banks coming out from the incumbents and also from the new players as well. But those are also in close partnership with the existing banks itself, right? So, I mean, typically you would be having a new challenger bank having a BIN sponsorship, let's say with a certain bank, and then at the same time maybe having a sponsor bank at the back. But of course, that's not going to be on the front. But typically, some of the way of the model of operating in the region specifically.
Your voice is not coming.
I think we've lost Namir.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry, I don't know why this wasn't mute for no reason. So,
Yeah.
well, basically, in terms of how we are currently operating in the region is mainly reliant and heavily reliant on these new players coming in, but these new players eventually have to partner with bank, right? So that's one way of operating. Like I said, the second way of operating is if you're basically heavily funded as well, or if you have a good amount of funding at the back, then it makes it a lot more easier for you then to basically engage directly with the regulators, work on the regulations. It's a little longer period, but then certainly that's more independent approach. However, once again, once you're setting up in the region, regulations are once again something that you need to be very wary of. Why? Because the thing is that we have different jurisdictions. So we are regimes, but a big one market itself. It's one market with different regulatory regimes. So let's say if you are setting up in UAE and then you need to set up in Egypt, Egypt is maybe having a diverse set of regulatory piece as well versus UAE, which will be having its own set of regulations. So we have different set of regulations, which does make it a lot more complicated. But once again, it's something that you need to basically have very as Sopnendu mentioned, by bringing everyone together and having a very cohesive approach in terms of how you are catering the regional opportunity. So in that scenario, what typically happens is, what we do by bringing the regulators together. So for one small example is the upcoming open banking vision that we are launching, in fact, today during FinTech Abu Dhabi, which is in collaboration with all the 18 central banks, 11 banking associations, 10 banks, and 6 fintechs from different parts of the world who have worked together to basically cater the open banking case in the region. One. And number two is that this communicates one more thing in terms of the openness of the regulators of the region, that they are willing to hear and to partner and to open themselves up to basically get the larger, to basically get the larger opportunity. So in terms of, once again, digital banking, neobanking, challenger banks, whatsoever you would like to call it, they are basically coming in. 2021 ideally is going to be the year where you have more of these new players coming into the banking space. You already have many digital banks. So for example, Live Bank is one of the banks here in the UAE. It is one of the fastest growing banks as well, ranked amongst the top 5 within almost 5 years of its operation in terms of the customers that they have. So that also communicates the overall adaptiveness of the customers over here in the region who are ready for such solutions.
Thank you. I think it touched a very good point, and that's been echoed by the others as well. No matter what jurisdiction or what kind of verticals we're looking at, that regulations is going to play a big role. Sopnendu, the MAS was one of the first regulators in the region, if not globally, to have a fintech office and a fintech officer in yourself, right? And you've been very actively building the ecosystem, not just as for Singapore, but in a sense, influencing what's happening in the region. My question to you is going to be like, from a government policy regulator perspective, the MAS has been doing quite a bit of work. What are you expecting, or what would you say that private enterprises need to do or contribute towards for building this collaborative ecosystem, especially when we're talking about cross-border initiatives? How can they help out or contribute to that?
Okay, look, the first and foremost in my mind is to define what is fintech. Largely, many a times we forget the fundamentals behind how to define the word of fintech appropriately. Then life becomes easier. For example, most of the time, a lot of the hubs dominant narrative when it comes to fintech has been either a payment discussion or a lending discussion. And that's the most romantic narrative people have in their brain when it comes to fintech, that it has to be a platform lending company or a lovely payment company. But the world of fintech has expanded much beyond that. So first and foremost is to define different asset class and for each asset class, what are the fintechs which is going to create the new opportunity, the next opportunity. For example, that can be a lovely fintech in the space of insurance. That can be a fintech in the space of wealth management. That can be a fintech in the case of private banking. There's a fintech on the trade finance. There are fintech in small businesses, digital transformation. I think defining the the breadth of fintech by asset class is the first rule of the process, which many hubs have to do before they embark on this cross-border partnership. That's one. Second thing is, once you define that well, then you know your regulatory limits. If you're taking deposit, the regulatory processes become far more complex. If you're not taking deposit, you're doing a banking services like lending and payment, it is relatively less complicated. And if you're doing a pure automation for an insurance company or a wealth management, it is like any other tech company. So then you got the regulatory definition well established. Then comes the third point is, where do you want to play? Do you want to play in the space of business to consumer or a business to business fintech? Because that's a significant difference in strategy. For example, a country like India, where there's a huge tech workforce, B2B is also equally attractive, and also B2C because they have a large population. For a country like Singapore, having a B2C strategy doesn't make any sense because you are a small country. So our focus has been B2B, how to be the engine behind large financial sector institutes so that they can be part of the new architecture of the financial services. And to end this point, from a cross-border thinking, is you have to go back to the foundational stack, because the world of digital economy runs on something called a foundational infrastructure, which is of 4 types. You should have a trusted identity. You should have a trusted data and data exchange. You should have a trusted interoperable payment system. And last, you should have a trusted consent system. Unless you have the 4 national infrastructure in place, very hard to push the big narrative on cross-border. Good example, India has most of this stack. Singapore has, many countries are building the stack. Once they get these 4 pieces together, moving forward on a cross-border will be far more easier, fruitful, and outcome-driven.
Thank you. And it's a good cue to bring in Dr. Tyagi with regards to the India stack, right? One of the first and one of the most scaled infrastructures that are available for interoperability in some senses, but also a digital identity and the build of the Aadhaar, right? So, Dr. Tyagi, how are you seeing that? NPCI recently announced about going overseas as well and building or supporting infrastructure for other ecosystems as well. How do you see India's role in that perspective on a cross-border basis when it comes to fintech and fintech infrastructure?
So as Mr. Mohanty said, that India is very nicely placed as far as the fintech, interoperability through cross-border is concerned, and the tremendous success of the India stack, I would say India fintech stack, have given us a lot of encouragement to do so. And if we talk about as a fintech nation, the 4 pillars we are standing on is the JAM Trinity, we call it. The J for the Janadhan account, which we have created, where the financial inclusion, have been at the forefront. The mobile penetration, we are having 60%, smart mobile penetration, and then this, Aadhaar for the, identification. Other than that, we are having, this building a scalable platform in terms of the UPI and the BBPS and the IMPS, all the scalable things we have developed, and allowing the banks and the fintechs and the wealth insurance lending players also to access platforms, all these platforms. So we have actually tasted this success of the India stack in fintech. And naturally, if NPCI is going for the cross-border arrangements and they are trying to solve the interoperability, that is a natural corollary of whatever success we have got over here. And I think Mr. Mohanty has rightly said that Singapore and India is very rightly, poised to, be in touch with the cross-border transactions, and we have the sufficient infrastructure in place. Regulatory aspects are only the another thing which I would like to take to Mr. Mohanty, which he has said about, that the payment and the lending is not the fintech. He's absolutely right. Actually, the fintech is beyond the payment lending. Though the 2,174 fintech we have, the 54% constitute the payment lending and the wealth tech, startups only. But I'm very happy to inform you that we are having the, companies into the insurtech also, regtech also, cyber security also, into the personal finance also. So we have covered the entire spectrum of the fintech startups in India, and we feel that this is, the way forward is interoperability, and regulatory aspect should be taken care. I always feel that the government's job is the facilitation job. You know, we should leave rest to the startup ecosystem and the corporates in between and the banks. We should make sure that all regulatory compliances are in place. Interoperability should be there.
Thank you. And you know, look, in Hong Kong, we've seen this also happening with HKMA. Whenever they do any cross-border initiatives, like with the Bank of Thailand, also with Singapore, etc., they bring in the banks to participate, like we did for trade finance, etc. And that's the same approach that MA has also been looking to bring in with Project Ubin, where you have a lot of banks involved. Similar things here in Hong Kong with the CBDC projects. So I think that's a key element of, you know, where corporates can participate at the early stage of a development of a regulatory piece, so that they can take over once the regulations are in place and the infrastructure has been ratified. Camilla, coming to Australia, right? We've seen Australian regulators be quite forward-thinking, quite a bit of growth locally in the ecosystem. Being where you are geographically, sometimes it's a bit distant to the rest of the Asia, but there is obviously strong cross-border engagement, right? So what are the key policies you are looking for from, say, the Australian regulators and policymakers to enable further cross-border growth for fintech partnerships?
So when we have the FinTech Bridge, which has been brilliant and a good initiative, but the thing is really also to see how successful are them.
Qualify the FinTech Bridge a little bit, just for the audience.
We have a FinTech Bridge to UK, and we have a FinTech Bridge to Singapore. Which helps fintechs, of course, to go. It gives them the passporting of some of the regulations. It also gives them some context when they come on the ground, and also access to investments. So it's initiatives to go between those countries. But one of the things is it's been hard to find the use cases from them. And that's something that we have talked a lot about, because people see and they hear about them, but they want to go in and see what is actually the success been from this. So there's a lot of good, useful initiatives with both sandboxes across the region and in Australia and those FinTech bridges. But I think if a more sharing of actually what's coming out of them, I keep on coming back to this, because it's something that's lacking across the industry, the sharing of best practice and use cases to find. And I think that is very important when we're going into the open banking conversation. I mean, we are a bit more than a year into it now, and we're starting to see use cases and apps and consumer uptake. But I think that really to work and to get use out of the API standards that we have is to really share the best cases. And I think that's the more policy around that. And then continue with the having clear directions of where regulations are going, so that when companies are coming into a country, have a forward-looking, like, this is how the regulation will come. I mean, it's hard to say that, but I think a good use case is the buy now, pay later, that nobody really know where is. But what we're seeing is those companies are innovating, so it's a little bit of space to see where it's landing. I know it's really hard for the regulators to know where to give space and where to protect consumers, where to protect the data and to protect the system. I mean, coming back to the trust again, it takes so many transactions to build up trust, but it's just a few or one error. So I think that's to drive standards and share best practice. But I often come back to that, but it is so important.
I think that's quite important as well. Takeshi-san, in Japan, we've seen the banks being quite actively involved in the fintech ecosystem, right, from the beginning, and some of them have also built out ecosystem like MUFG with the MUFG coin, which is 3-4 years old, in line with what UBS was doing. How are you seeing the private enterprises, both banks and fintechs, building towards cross-border partnerships? How are they working with the government, both locally and internationally?
Okay. In terms of banking industry, our regulators pushed banks open their APIs to the industry, and so we already have a open banking API in Japan, but it's only in the banking vertical. So there's no API ecosystem for capital markets and insurance as well. So we need to more collaboration in these three pillars or verticals. And recently, our regulators announced that they established a new regulatory framework for financial services dealing license, which is cross-sector, cross-sectional license. So when we have this kind of regulatory framework, super apps or big techs, which have a huge interface for individuals, they can facilitate the transaction of financial instruments or financial transactions. So this is what's going on in Japan, but actually it's not the domestic move. So we need to more collaboration with other international API platforms. And also we need to collaborate with sandboxes with other countries, because FinTech is highly regulated. So we need to interoperability among regulatory sandbox as well.
Thank you. Namir, you mentioned about that initiative on open banking and others that, in the MENA, you're going to announce about with 18 participants. Could you mention, managing something that is a cross-border association in a time when FinTech has just been emerging and coming out or growing in the Middle East? What were some of the challenges that you found while trying to build this consensus and come up with bringing everybody together? And what were the lessons, if you could share something?
The thing that I would like to say, it's a very diverse region in terms of cultures. Yeah. So the intent would be there, but the cultures would differ, right? So being able to bring that cultural synergy, right? That mindset synergy is usually a bit of a challenge, but that once again is, I would say, when we're basically having these conversations with the regulators, it's more about channelizing the intent. So it's more about, being able to navigate the discussion despite the cultural differences, because the end goal is the same. Because by the end of the day, the regulators over here, I would say initially it was a bit of a careful step for them, but now they have really woken up to it. And they're going very aggressive in terms of the regimes, the regulations, and the partnerships, right? So, I mean, just to add to this, since we're speaking, I mean, there's a co-sandboxing engagement that's going to be announced as well. So the co-sandboxing engagement is more towards offshore regulators working with the mainland regulators, and that basically enables once again a lot more openness that brings in a lot more connectivity into the system, that brings in a lot more once again, relevance for you to be able to then set up in the country and then being able to operate, easily amongst different jurisdictions itself. So, but that's like one country, but cross country, like I said, the impediments that we would only face would be more towards education, where we have to basically go and then we have to have different various conversations, constantly have conversations, because you see, once again, sometimes even now, I mean, not just in the Middle Eastern part of the world, in different parts of the world as well, there is a certain group of people that would still be reluctant and hesitant to jump towards complete digitization or to basically shape up the regulations or the regimes. So therefore, it is imperative and very much required for us to have these constant conversations with the regulators and with the larger community itself. The community pushes and the regulator needs to be pushed as well. But more or less, like I said, cultural differences would be the major ones, but the overall end game where everyone wants to be there, where everyone wants to achieve that certain level, that kind of helps us push the conversation. So I believe that is something that had certainly helped us, yes.
Thanks. So I'm going to come to you now, because there's a lot of conversations on regulators, but we have seen cross-border initiatives. We've seen GFIN initiated by FCA, but a lot of the regulators participating in it. You have the cross-border sandbox as well as an initiative that's very beneficial for both startups, but also, I guess, to provide a broader understanding for most regulators to see what's growing in different parts. Would you be able to share some insights from these conversations that the regulators are having between each other on both setting up standards or interoperability or collaboration? How are you seeing that grow, and what has been like the breakthrough moments that you've seen?
Okay, so sorry, it's question to me, right?
Yes, yeah, apologies for that.
Okay. Hello. Yes.
Then it's for you. Yeah.
Okay. So no, look, there are many examples I can state in terms of where the progress has been real and very much visible. Let me take example. Cross-border payments. There's not a single country in the world where a domestic payment is actually connected to another country's domestic payment. And it has just started. The first country which will connect the respective domestic systems, which has similar structure, will be, as an example, Singapore and Thailand. So they will. So today, I mean, first quarter next year, you can send money to somebody in Thailand or from Singapore by just knowing the mobile phone number as an identifier. Similarly, Singapore and India will have their local domestic payment system getting connected, and that allows a cross-border transfer like a local payment. Now, why this is critical? It clearly demonstrates that regulators have found a way to have common policy stance, common understanding of moving money from A country to B country, as you know, is one of the most complex process from AML and terrorism financing, settlement, FX, and the other processes which involved in between. In ability to get over that and able to send money in less than 5 minutes and a cross-border transfer with an affordable price is a huge achievement, not only from a system connectivity, but also from a regulatory, common regulatory approach to cross-border payment. Same thing has happened for QR payments, merchant payment. For example, RuPay in India is now accepted in Singapore, and vice versa, Singapore Nets is also getting accepted in India. So that's one example of how the progress has been real and regulators have found a way to work together. The second example in my mind would be in the space of on the RegTech side. And here, one of the things happened during pandemic is that Bank of International Settlement actually created one of the most complex and global hackathon in the space of getting every central bank to work on 4 or 5 common issues around RegTech and SupTech, supervised technology. And they found a way with BIS involvement to find common ground how they can use in multiple locations similar RegTech and SupTech solutions. That's another example of in a different way regulators have approached. Third example would be in the question around use of what I call the APIs. Now, open banking has been discussed, and I don't want to repeat more around that. But if you take the open banking and the APIs out of that equation, what really means that can the bank share the data in the most elegant and most eloquent way without causing a lot of friction? Now, and many regulators are looking at respective data policies, data privacy, consent mechanism, and that is the area which needs a lot of discussion. Discussion has just started around the data policies, cross-border data access. Perhaps to me, that's the most outstanding and critical policy discussion to happen as we look forward to get out of the COVID-19 recovery. And that is a work in progress. And I'm sure it will take its own shape as we continue to push the discussion forward. Now, beyond that, there are definitely a lot of collaboration in terms of projects in the space of DLT, as you know, in the Hong Kong did with Bank of Thailand, we did with many jurisdictions. In my mind, that the wholesale currency, wholesale central bank digital currency, does see a lot of regulatory sharing of knowledge and understanding, and that will see some real production grade activity coming early next year or sometime next year. So these are the examples where regulators have moved forward to getting things done. GIFIN is one of the forums where many regulators participate, exchange information, and to square off the role of sandbox. I think different countries have different rules for sandbox. There's a certain way sandbox is operated in UK. There's a certain way MENA is doing, certain way India is also doing their own way of sandbox, and there's a Singapore way of doing sandbox. For example, so this is an essential difference for all of your audience to know. In Singapore, as an example, the sandbox we do are production grade sandbox, which means you have the real customer, real system to run it. In some market, it can be a pre-production sandbox. So why do I say that this is critical? Because this reflects the regulator's appetite to understand the impact of technology and business model. And once they get comfortable with this idea of understanding experiments better, I think there will be a far more better synergy in years to come as they find common ground in many of these services. As I said, ultimately we got to solve a common problem, which is not yet solved, which is inclusion, access to risk product, pension challenges, insurance challenges. There's a whole set of unmet financial need. Without solving that, I think we have not done our task, or rather our task is half finished as a common from a regulatory community or a common practitioner in the space of fintech.
I think that's a very insightful note to end with, right? So we've had a lot of discussion around why cross borders are important. As long as you have closed ecosystems, you may grow in those. And as Sop gave in the example in the beginning, you will have unicorns that grow. But when you need to expand and you need to have cross-border collaboration, we are in a world that had been growing significantly from a globalization perspective. And day by day, we're seeing more collaboration. And eventually, you will see probably more interoperability and standardization of regulations, which could be 90-95% similar. The way I see UK regulations with Hong Kong, Singapore, and the major financial services centers, you have very similar regulations overall, but some specific to the local ecosystem, it will continue. So collaboration is going to be important. Participation will be required from all bodies, ranging from associations like ours to the regulators, government, and the private enterprises. Otherwise, it's going to be half done, and financial inclusion is going to be the key theme to bring everything together. And financial inclusion is not just about retail players, it's also about the businesses who need services, and in a lot of cases, cross-border services that are impeded due to various reasons. So we hope this discussion has been very insightful for you. It has been a lot of learning for me from all the distinguished guests here. And I want to thank on behalf of ETBFSI for their wonderful insights, and for all of you for joining us for the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.